Martino and the Forest, 333 AD. I'm telling you, Martino, nobody has seen them anymore. All the better, but stay on your guard. Don't worry. We'll do what we always do. If we spot disorganized bands, we'll light the small fire. For a proper army, we'll light the big one, with leaves and damp wood. Our water reserves are at maximum, and as you know, there's plenty of game around here. My worry isn't about enemies lurking in the undergrowth, Quinto. Winter isn't too kind around these parts, and this isn't your amiternum. 2 years ago, after a snowfall, the garrison was cut off for an entire month. 3 soldiers lost their lives, and the others barely pulled through. So, Martino, you're worried about this poor soft-skinned Italic? Asked the burly commander of the guard post, in a teasing tone. Quinto stood 1.70 meters tall, and his gnarled, bald head, scarred in several places from wearing a bronze and leather helmet, was the size of an ox's. You know I grew up in Pavia, and I know men from the south all too well. Winters are cold even at the foot of the Corno Grande, young lord. My men are the sons of legionaries, raised right here in these lands. I mean no disrespect, but wasn't your father once the praefectus fabrum in these parts? And if you didn't know, your appearance alone would betray that, if not your father, at least your grandfather was a man from the south. Keep that up, and the next shipment of wine I send you will be watered down with horse piss. That's still better than the goat piss you've been using until now. You ungrateful bastard, the Roman patrician said, laughing. Martino sat astride his horse, an enormous equus magnus that snorted and tossed its head, annoyed by the 2 brown-coated dogs playfully tussling near its shaggy forelegs. We'll keep watch, safe and well protected, don't worry. But tell me, aren't you afraid to roam the forest with only Bartolomeo and your dogs for company? The imperial cavalry fears no danger, Quinto. Don't you know that by now? As for my companions, I'd rather have a few good ones than an entire herd, and besides, the forest is my friend, replied the tall, dark-haired man they called Martino, speaking frankly. Very few and very good, grunted the patrician's companion, who had remained respectfully silent until then. He was as big as a bear, perhaps just as hairy, with a thick black beard that nearly reached his eyes. Bartolomeo, look after your lord, or half the patrician's daughters in Sabaria will hunt you down and have your hide, added Quinto Durio, just before his guards shut the entrance to the small fortress with heavy bars. The guard post stood atop a hill the natives called Irottko, 18 miles north of the Roman colony of Sabaria. From the summit of the mountain, one had a 360-degree view. South and east lay the Pannonian Plateau, stretching as far as the eye could see. To the north and west, the impenetrable Hercynian forest concealed unknown mountains, warlike tribes, and beasts never seen by most of the Italic conquerors who had come from the south centuries earlier. Rome was not so far off, but the unknown lay perilously close in these frontier territories of the empire's northeast. Civilized settlements in those zones generally prospered thanks to the amber trade, which reached Pannonia along routes that vanished into forests and valleys unknown to the Romans. This precious material came from the wild lands beyond the sprawling, impassable forest, where legions could not penetrate. 3 days' march south stood farmland near the Great Lake Plazo, and once you crossed Illyricum, you neared the Italic Peninsula and the vibrant core of civilization. Over time, the guard post detachments had cleared all the trees at the summit of the hill to ensure the widest possible view of the surroundings, preventing anyone from ambushing the outpost. The 2 men on horseback could enjoy the boundless landscape before plunging into the dense woodland that covered the rest of the headland. Just a week earlier, a courier from Irottko had brought word to Sabaria that small bands of natives, unknown tribes, had been seen roaming the northern ridge of the headland. When Martino heard, he immediately set out with his usual retinue, his loyal and formidable servant Bartolomeo, plus his 2 inseparable mastiffs. After a brief talk with Quinto, head of the garrison, they stocked up on water and prepared to head for the eastern part of Irottko, where a spring had given rise to a newly Romanized settlement of local colonists who spoke a mix of Germanic and Latin. That tiny, rugged village had no representative of imperial authority, and its people, hunters, fur traders, and rudimentary farmers, paid no taxes. Martino planned to speak with them about the band the outpost soldier claimed to have seen, or more generally to gather any news about strangers passing through. Quinto had arranged for him to meet the legionary who had spotted the band. The man's account was quite sparse, disappointing the young Roman patrician, who was itching for adventure and glory. The soldier said that shortly after dawn, he had been near the northern slope of the headland, checking boar traps, when, just a few hundred meters away, he saw 6 men wearing very rough hides, moving in single file and in silence through the woods. What aroused his suspicion was their quiet, furtive manner. The natives in those parts were generally noisy, and for years they had worn finely worked cloth and leather acquired through barter with Sabaria's colonists. The legionary trailed them for some distance but lost them when they crossed a clearing he had tried to skirt, not wanting to emerge in the open and risk being discovered. He soon returned to the guard post to report to Quinto, who immediately sent word to Sabaria. "Bartolomeo, do you miss Pavia?" Martino asked his traveling companion as they followed a path that would take them to the settlement. "Pavia? No, but I miss my mother. You've never told me about her. Is she big and strong like you?" "On the contrary, she's small and skinny, but fiercer than a weasel." "Oh, really? A weasel? Ever see her kill a basilisk?" "Probably not, but she did save me from my madman of a father. That bastard was worse than any basilisk. Whenever his master beat him, he'd try to take it out on me, but if my mother was around, she always protected me, taking all the blows I'd have otherwise received." "I'm sorry." "No need to be. The last time that scoundrel tried anything, I broke his arm. I was 12 and nearly as tall as him at that age, but a lot stronger. If I stayed in Pavia, he never touched either of us again. I hope by now the dog is dead. It's been 8 years since we left, and the time has flown like lightning. We set out right after hearing that Constantine had been victorious at Adrianople. You were so happy to go back to your hometown. I remember you hated the Po Plain, Martino. I met good folk in Pavia and Cisalpine Gaul, but the Italic land is unhealthy, choked with people and that suffocating heat. Here, there's more room to live. People are simpler, less deceitful." "Mh, if you say so," Bartolomeo grumbled, unconvinced. Like all servants, the bearded giant adapted quickly to new places, but these misty, damp, boundless woods worried him. "Relax, Bartolomeo," Martino said, guessing his man's thoughts, then added, "You know that by next spring I'll be headed for the south of Gaul, and of course you'll come with me. The Rhine frontier, which we won't be anywhere near, is safer than the Danube one. I have reason to think you'll feel calmer there. We just need to get through this winter, and you know barbarians seldom cross borders in the cold season. It's not the barbarians themselves that bother me. The thing is, you grow more reckless by the day, my lord. Sometimes I wonder if you've let those Christians' chatter go to your head and turned you so carefree about protecting your life and mine. You can't believe in providence, can you? Your cynicism floors me. I had no idea you were a follower of the Stoics, Bartolomeo. I fear you'll start quoting the ancient writings of Zeno of Citium any moment." "I don't even know who that is, my lord. All I know is that Christians are oddly careless because they believe their lives are already laid out by their all-seeing, all-powerful God. The rest of us rely more on reason, even those who chase glory at the cost of their lives." "You're quite astute for an illiterate man." "My lord, I didn't mean." "Speak freely, Bartolomeo. I trust your intuition and experience. Too often, scholars' rhetoric is hollow and weak, while I've seen your broadsword weave arguments so irrefutable that it's thanks only to its eloquence that I'm alive to speak with you now. I'm afraid that woman, that Christian, I don't remember her name, may have sown those strange Eastern superstitions in your courageous heart. Save your concern. You should know where my faith lies, Bartolomeo, in the arm that wields the sword and the mind that rules my heart. And yet I've learned the hard way that when you're as young as you are, love can creep into a man's mind like rust in a ballista's gears. Suddenly everything jams, and disaster follows. I've never seen you so confused over a girl, and it worries me. Your father ordered me to keep watch over you, and I'm not sure if my vigilance ends with sword blows. My dear Bartolomeo, Thea belongs to the past. It's been almost 2 years since I last saw her. As graceless as their names may sound, the women from the northeast are lovely. I recall how you used to talk at length about the conversations you had with that girl. I won't deny I was struck by her faith and her intelligence. They're a strange folk, my lord. Christians have some peculiar sexual customs. They treat love in a very morbid way and give sex all kinds of absurd meanings. Not her. Her body and her spirit were equally generous. She wanted me as her husband, and had it not been for her damn father. Yes, I remember the father and his henchman, Bartolomeo muttered, touching a scar near his left collarbone, grim evidence of the events they were recalling. The loyal servant had had to cut down 3 men before Thea's father, Ranillo, abandoned his plan to take revenge on Martino. Ranillo, a merchant of Gothic origin living in Sabaria, was also a recently converted Christian, a follower of the young missionary Ulfilas. In traditional Gothic fashion, Ranillo was not used to meekness, and only the menacing sword of Bartolomeo, after it dispatched all his goons, could force him to show mercy. Of course, Martino wasn't present for the slaughter. Realizing he was in real trouble, wanted all over Sabaria by 4 hulking, bearded brutes, he fled to the woods, just as he always did when his mischief landed him in a fix. Bartolomeo, after forcing Ranillo to see reason in his own style, eventually found the young lord hiding in a cave along Irottko's southern slope, not far from where they stood that day. Bartolomeo had searched desperately for him, finally following his instincts to the headland, one of Martino's favorite haunts. He remembered letting out a massive sigh of relief upon finding the young patrician there with his 2 mastiffs, then hardly more than pups, all feasting on roast venison. Bartolomeo recalled that after his initial relief, he'd fought the strong urge to give the boy a smack, but he relented not so much because Martino was his lord, but because, after all, the lad hadn't done anything truly wrong. Ranillo was a madman, and his new faith had made him even more irrational than Goths usually were. After a brief talk between them, Bartolomeo had joined the venison feast. When they finished eating, the boy tended his servant's numerous wounds. Seeing how badly injured Bartolomeo was, Martino deeply regretted his actions. A blow to Bartolomeo's collarbone had fractured the bone. After a long sleep in Martino's hideout, they took the path back to Sabaria. That day, they were traveling on a path that ran parallel to the one they'd taken years before, after the whole affair with Ranillo and Thea. They were heading west, with the 2 dogs sprinting back and forth along a scarcely trodden track through the lush vegetation. The mastiffs shook dew from the foliage as they passed, and the only sounds in the brush were their panting. Suddenly, the dogs stopped and pointed toward a hollow. Martino noticed and called them back in a low voice, "Otro, Mera, here, at once, down." Both dogs obeyed their master, sitting close to the horse. Martino dismounted silently and handed the reins to Bartolomeo. Then he cautiously made his way toward the dip in the ground. At the bottom of what appeared to be a cast sinkhole, 8 armed men were facing off, silently. 3 of them, their clothing nearly in tatters, were backed up against a large elm. One, noticeably older than the other 2, held only a long staff, while his companions clutched short, broad swords. Surrounding them were 5 others in roughly tanned hides, armed with a variety of swords and spears. Martino realized that though there was 1 fewer than reported, these 5 matched the description given by Quinto's soldier. He reacted without hesitation, catching Bartolomeo off guard as the big man also dismounted to follow. The patrician charged the fighting men, sword drawn. After only a split second of surprise, Bartolomeo did the same, stifling an impulse to shout at Martino to stop. He didn't want to risk alerting those strangers and losing the element of surprise. Nonetheless, the 5 attackers spotted the newcomers. 2 turned to face them. Bartolomeo noted the stunned expressions on those 5 men, who clearly hadn't expected anyone to stumble upon their ambush deep in the woods. Up close, it was obvious that the 3 men sheltering near the elm were at the brink of collapse. The 2 younger ones bore multiple wounds, and the old man was clinging to his staff more than brandishing it. One of the attackers said, "The ears." Martino, who had met people from every corner of the empire, recognized the distinctive Syrian accent in that man's Latin. The other 4 stuffed something into their ears and likely didn't even hear Martino shout, "Stop, you dogs, what do you think you're doing? Stop, I say. You're facing an imperial cavalryman." The 5th man, the only one not plugging his ears, showed no sign of having heard Martino's words. Instead of surrendering, he pulled out a flute and started to play as if nothing else were happening. The sound seemed faint and far away, Martino thought, and that typically Eastern melody felt utterly out of place amid oaks and firs. The Roman patrician tried to demand an explanation for this absurd behavior, but realized not only that the words stuck in his throat but that even the slightest movement took tremendous effort. When two of the attackers in hides advanced on him, he had to fight with all his might to utter the name Bartolomeo. His voice came out sluggish and slurred. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw his servant standing just behind him, just as motionless, like he'd been petrified. The attackers were barely 2 meters away from Martino when Irottko and Mera crashed into the flutist, slamming him to the ground like two warhorses at a gallop. Instantly, Martino snapped out of that bizarre hypnotic state and slashed at the nearest of the men rushing him, while Bartolomeo tackled the other. The fight was over almost instantly. Bartolomeo, seized by a blind fury, felled his opponent with 2 mighty blows, then rushed to help Martino, killing the second attacker as well. The remaining 2 fled into the forest, chased by the mastiffs. One was brought down by the 2 beasts, while the other vanished into the undergrowth. When the dogs, having finished off the man they'd caught, turned to pursue the last attacker, Martino called them back. With the dogs at his side, the young patrician approached the 3 men who had been under attack. One was dead, his throat slit in a grisly wound. The other 2, by the look of their injuries, wouldn't be long in following him to the underworld. Bartolomeo hung back slightly, watching every faint movement of the 2 survivors. The servant from Pavia felt they had risked more than enough that day, and Martino's rash behavior worried him greatly. Bartolomeo, give them water, Martino said, in the commanding tone of someone used to being obeyed. Bartolomeo immediately complied, offering a leather flask to the young man lying on the ground. But he quickly saw that the fellow was too weak to hold it, so he helped him drink. The man took a single swallow, looked dimly at his rescuer, and died without a word. Irottko and Mera approached, sniffed the body, and whimpered. Meanwhile, Martino tended to the older man, who was trembling like a leaf. He helped him lie down and offered him some water from the flask Bartolomeo had handed over. Do you understand my language, old man? Of course. I taught Latin to the children of Antia's and Palmyra's richest families. My name is Astacus of Nicomedia. I was born in Anatolia. I studied in Alexandria and Athens. I was on my way to Egypt with my companions. Who are you, my young savior? Martino Percuvianus, and this is my servant, Bartolomeo. Martino, it seems your rescue came too late. I'll die here in the hills of Pannonia, alongside Parpios and Carillos. The old man spoke with difficulty, clutching his stomach. He stared sadly at the corpses of his comrades, examined his own gaping wound with bloody hands, and sighed. The attackers had managed to land a mortal blow to his abdomen, from which blood steadily trickled. What did these men want from you? Asked the Roman patrician, pointing at the attackers' bodies. They've been on our trail ever since we left Britannia. First, we passed through Jute lands, then through territories once held by the Goths, now under the Huns' yoke, marching through lands even wilder than this. We finally made it back inside the Empire's borders here in Pannonia, all in hopes of losing them. There were 6 until 2 days ago, then Parpios slew one under cover of night. The old man gestured to his companion who had just died and continued, speaking in a faint voice, we hoped to outrun them, but as you see, we failed. I noticed they aren't bandits from around here. Who are they? They are shepherds. Drink, old man, don't strain yourself. From their weapons, I doubt they're Britannic herdsmen. What was that instrument they were playing? Why couldn't we move? Bartolomeo cut in. That is the flute of Pan. Farther east, they call it Krishna's flute, after the Eastern Christ. It's made of a wood unknown in this part of the world and can seize a man's soul, even those who command the ancestral technique. Which technique do you mean, old man? Martino couldn't grasp the meaning of his words. If not for your dogs, you'd be lying here dead, like my companions. Why ask what I mean? Didn't you yourself feel your strength leave you and your mind go blank under the flute spell? Bartolomeo, who had listened to every word of the exchange between the 2 crouched men, began scouring the ground for the flute the dying man had mentioned. At last, He found it beneath the corpse of its player, smeared with blood and dirt, but intact. What did they want from you? Why chase you across so many leagues? The old man didn't answer. Listen, there's a guard post only about 3 miles away. Think you can make it? They've got a soldier there who's quite good with a needle, and he might be able to treat you. You're kind, young friend, but I doubt it. You say they were shepherds. Maybe you're right. Perhaps you stole some of their sheep. The Britons are quite vengeful, at least, so they say. Don't joke with me. I know I won't make it to your outpost. My hour has come. Old man, listen, you and your brave servant tried to save me and my companions, and I'm grateful. Yet you may have made a grave error by letting that last man escape. If he manages to reach his brethren alive, rest assured they'll come looking for you. So, who are they really, and why call them shepherds? Take this. Use it yourself, if you can, or give it to someone worthy of possessing it. If the shepherds come after you and you realize all is lost, find the oldest tree you can and bury it among the roots, before they kill you and take it. It's what I was trying to do. Worthy of what? I don't understand you, old man. Your dreams will tell you. Take it and keep it on you always. What is it? Martino asked, grabbing the leather pouch the old man was holding out with his bloody hand. I was taking it to Alexandria because Queen Boudicca commanded me in a dream. I was supposed to place it in the hands of an Egyptian woman named Hypatia, who may not even be born yet, or entrust it to someone who would deliver it to her at the right time. I couldn't and wouldn't use it myself. Maybe no man can, I can't be certain. All I know is that in ancient times it belonged to Andraste, and then finally to Boudicca, queen of the Iceni, who dared to defy Rome. Old man, that was ages ago. 3 centuries. Since that fearsome woman, no one has awakened the amulet's power. The Druids safeguarded it all this time, then gave it to me for reasons unknown. Now that death comes, I see things more clearly, and I realize I've placed it in the right hands. Maybe the amulet wanted to be yours before reaching its ultimate destination. Guard it well. Having spoken those last words with enormous effort, Asticus of Nicomedia smiled faintly and died. Once again, Martino's dogs whimpered. What's in that pouch? Asked Bartolomeo. Martino opened the leather bundle and pulled out a piece of amber nearly as big as an orange. Inside the stone, amid its orange sheen, one could make out the head of a praying mantis 20 times bigger than normal. How horrible! Bartolomeo exclaimed, grabbing his crotch with his left hand in the italic gesture to ward off bad luck. It's a very precious jewel, said the young man. You plan to sell it? I don't know yet, Bartolomeo. The old man's words struck me. If that flute works, and I can manage to blow a tune of my own into it, rest assured we won't need to sell a thing to amass all the gold we want. So, you mean to pillage Gaul, my lord? On the contrary, I aim to be a benefactor, not a raider. I'm 17, the perfect age to be someone's savior. Then I'll have my sword at the ready, because the word savior brings some grim visions to my mind. I feel a foreboding of rivers of blood. You might not believe in Christian providence, but you're quite superstitious, old friend. Let's bury these bodies beneath the tree they chose for their final stand and be on our way. Now we know who those strangers were that the outpost legionary mentioned. Really? Who were they? From the look of them, they might all come from different corners of the earth. See here, this one even looks Hyperborean, he's got icy grey eyes. They were Hunnic shepherds who crossed the border. And their horses. They say Huns never part with their nags, yet these were seen walking on foot. Bartolomeo, you ask too many questions, you know that? If we said they were Goths or Lombards, we'd risk stirring up a panic. We'll say they were wandering Huns. Remember that the Danube frontier is uncomfortably close. People in Sabaria won't challenge that story. Everyone knows those nomad barbarians loot caravans of all kinds, and their domain runs from the Baltic to the Caspian Sea. Nobody will wonder where they got such Asinaces blades. Quinto is the only one who might contradict us. If I can't persuade him, we'll lull the entire guard post into a stupor with the flute and slaughter them to the last man. It's a strange musical instrument, But as you know, music is one of my talents, and I think I recall that hateful tune well enough. Maybe I'll do a few trials on you first, before we act. Didn't I say something about rivers of blood? Come on, let's start digging. We'll bury these 3 under the tree, then the others over there, in the middle of the hollow.